Jai Shri Radhe, Sab Vaishnav ko Jai Shri Krishna. Today is day 116 and Varta 93, the story of the three pots man, a Brahmin from Siddhpur, Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of Sattvic disposition. In the eternal Leela, her name is Jayashri because she had the quality of Sri Swamiji's transcendental beauty. Sri Thakurji is very attracted to her and very attached to her. She manifests from Chabi Singhi and is thus a form of her divine loving sentiment. Here he was born in a Brahmin family in Siddhpur. At the moment of his birth, he called out the Lord's name. His parents were very surprised by this. He would not drink his mother's milk for a full 3 days, and she became very anxious. About him even staying alive. She gave him some cow's milk and he drank a bit, so she continued to give it to him. From the age of just 5, he started to chant the Lord's name. He would not speak to anyone nor sit close to anyone. He was like a renunciate. His mother and father then understood that he was not an ordinary worldly child, and they should not expect such behaviour from him. He would not eat and survived on cow's milk. When he was 15, Sri Gosaiji came to Siddhpur. He went to the banks of the Saraswati river to bathe. At that time the boy was also bathing there, and he caught sight of Sri Gosaiji, who appeared to him as the Lord himself. The renunciate boy addressed him, "O Maharaj, I have realized who you really are. Please bless me and take me into your shelter. I have been separated from you for too many days. Today I have been granted your sight." Sri Gosaiji replied, "You are a divine soul. I have come here for the sake of uplifting you. Please go and stand in the river's waters, and I shall initiate you with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandh, and take you as my disciple whilst you are standing therein." Sri Gosaiji completed his bath in the Saraswati and then initiated the boy within those waters. At the very moment that Sri Gosaiji gave him the Brahma Sambandh initiation, he had the direct experience of all the Lord's pastimes, and the Lord took up residence in the boy's heart. Sri Gosaiji told him that this loving connection to the Lord was now perfect, and that the material world could no longer present him with any obstacle. From now on, cook and offer to the Lord. Live wherever you wish. Time and place will not hinder you. Sri Gosaiji then travelled on to have the holy sight of Sri Ranchor Lalji in Dwarka. The boy began to wander around like a renunciate. He would beg for supplies, cook, offer and receive prasad. His parents addressed him, "O son, you eat grains now, so you should come home and eat here. Why do you have to do cooking separately?" He replied, "I have now renounced the world. I am no longer related to you. Please do not feel any attachment to me. This can only bring you grief." Saying this, he walked out of his house. He would chant the 8-syllable mantra ceaselessly and never stayed in one place. His heart and mind were always filled with the Lord's pastimes. He spoke to no one. Part 1. Once the renunciate boy travelled from Gujarat to Srinathdwara to have the holy sight of Srinathji. He always carried three pots of water with him, made from dried out gourds. He had one on his shoulder that he used for cleaning and washing for Seva, one at his back waist that he used within his orthodox Seva, and one at his front waist that he used for any other uses outside Seva. Wherever he was, he would beg for supplies, cook and offer to the Lord, partake of prasad and then go to the nearest camp. One day there was heavy rain. It continued for 3 whole days. He could not venture out at all. He wondered what he should do because he had no place to store water and it would be impossible to collect supplies in that weather. He decided to find the house of a disciple of Sri Gosaiji, to take Mahaprasad there and also to take rest. He thought, "Then I will be okay. I have been so wet that I have not slept for these 3 days." Bhav Prakash. It would be possible to harbour a doubt here. He was an accomplished Vaishnava whom bodily concern should not hinder. Time and place could not also hinder him. Why did he have these problems? Why was he worrying about eating and drinking? The answer given here is that if he so desired, even the rain would stop and he would have no concerns for his eating and drinking. However, beyond this, it was time for him to grace a king for whose sake Sri Thakurji created this unusual situation. An accomplished Vaishnava has no need for anything, but if they do, they should be known to be to the direct action of the Lord for the sake of blessing another soul. This is the principle here. There was a large village nearby where a king lived. This king had many wives but no son. The king was getting old. A Brahmin devotee of Shiva came there who had the direct experience of Lord Shiva. He told the king to give him 5,000 rupees so that he could try to help him to beget a child. The king said to him, "If it is not in my fate to have a son, then what can you possibly do about it?" The Brahmin replied, "I can communicate with Lord Shiva. I can ask Shivji and get him to grant you a child." The king gave him 5,000 rupees. The Brahmin took the money, accepting it as a donation for him to perform the necessary acts and give their fruit to the giver. He performed sacrifices in the name of Shiva and tried so hard. However, all the money was wasted and no child was born. The Brahmin decided to commit suicide in Shiva's name. Shivji himself appeared and said to the Brahmin, "Why do you want to kill yourself? It is not in his fate to have a son." The Brahmin replied, "You should give one son to that king. I have been serving you for a long time. Please give him one son. That is my promise. Then my promise will become true. Otherwise, yes, I shall die and it will be your fault." Shivji said, "Wait a minute. I will go and ask Lord Vishnu." Shivji then approached Vishnu and supplicated, "O Maharaj, I have favoured one Brahmin. He wants to grant the birth of a son to a certain king. Otherwise he is going to kill himself in my name and blame me." Lord Vishnu heard this and laughed. "Oh," he said, "Mahadevji, this king will not have a son even in his dreams. What can I do? Go to that Brahmin and tell him that the king is just not fated to have a son, and that if he wants to die because of that, then it is his choice." Mahadevji approached the Brahmin and said to him, "I went to Lord Vishnu and he told him your situation. He also declared that it is not in the king's fate to have a son, and that if you should wish to die over this, then it is your fault choice alone, that it is not his fault." He left after telling the Brahmin all this. The Brahmin then went to the king. He told the king that Lord had been approached on his behalf, but that he had also said that the king's fate was not to have a son, and that he could not change this. The king said, "Well, I told you that at the start, that it was not my luck to have a son." The king gave the Brahmin 20 rupees and asked him to leave, telling him to keep in touch. "Do not worry," he said. "What can you do if I am not fated to have a son?" The Brahmin left and returned home. In that village, and there was another Brahmin, a Vaishnava. His daily regular practice was to complete his 3 Thakurji Seva up to after the lunchtime offering, to cover up his plate of prasad and then go out of the village to a lake and sit to chant the Lord's name. He also had it in his mind to meet another Vaishnava so that he could have the pleasure of feeding them with the prasad, so that he could feed them first and then proceed to partake himself. On the days that he could not find any Vaishnava, he fed the prasad to a cow before eating. One day when he was sitting there chanting, that renunciate disciple of Sri Gosaiji, who had not eaten for 3 days, came to that very place. The Brahmin recognized him to be a Vaishnava from his forehead mark and his tulsi kantis. He also realized that he was a renunciate Vaishnava by the fact that he had 3 pots, because any other would be able to make do with just 1 pot. He thought that he must be the disciple of Sri Gosaiji. Why? Because the 3 pots must be to keep water separately for purification for Seva, used within the closed Seva, and then water for other purposes. The Brahmin greeted him with the name of the Lord. They embraced each other and felt great bliss. The Brahmin Vaishnava invited the renunciate Vaishnava to his home to partake of Mahaprasad. He took him home and fed him. It had been a little festival that day, and there were special dishes. The renunciate Vaishnava relished the Mahaprasad. He then told the Brahmin Vaishnava, "I have not slept for 3 nights. Please show me one place where I can rest." He gave him a mat and cover to spread in an isolated spot. The renunciate Vaishnav slept most blissfully there. When it was time for the evening ceremony of lights, the Brahmin Vaishnava woke him. He came to see Aarti and then stayed there. After Sri Thakurji's supper, the Brahmin gave him some more prasad, and he slept the whole night there. When he woke up in the morning, the renunciate said, "I will go now." Here we will cease the reading for today and continue tomorrow. Jai Shri Radhe, सब वैष्णवों को सादर सप्रेम जय श्री कृष्ण। आज के आनंद की जय हो। जय जय श्री राधे जी।